Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic, the only ministry in the world that looks at the truth of the Bible in regards to the Septuagint and the Masoretic. So we look at the Septuagint, which is the Bible that Jesus Christ and his disciples had. It was done 300 years before he came. Basically, it's a translation of the original Hebrew into Greek. And the Masoretic text on the right-hand side, which is the version of the scriptures that came 300 years after Jesus Christ already died and was resurrected. So we're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 25 today. There are 19 verses. Beginning in verse 1, we see the word dispute being used versus controversy. So dispute is essentially an issue, a dispute between two people, which can be compared to two people going to court is an example. Controversy is simply something that is controversial. It could be, doesn't have to be necessarily a dispute. It could simply mean something that is some situation where people are arguing about something. It doesn't have to be a dispute between two people. It could just mean something that is controversial. Could be anything. Doesn't have to be necessarily, again, between two people. It's not a conflict. It is simply something that is maybe spectacular or something that is very noteworthy. We look at the news and we look at a lot of things in social media and cause controversy. Could be something going viral. I mean, there's so many definitions of what this could mean. But essentially, it's more specific in the Septuagint as to what this is. In verse 2, the word unrighteous is used versus a wicked man. A significant difference that is noted here in the same verse is the use of the word stripes, which is a specific method to inflict punishment, which is by whipping. In the Masoretic, it expresses this punishment, this form of punishment, as being beaten, meaning punching someone with fists, beating them down, or perhaps even kicking them down, or any other means. Doesn't have to be by whipping. So that is a little vague and open to interpretation in the Masoretic. You shall lay him down, is the instruction here, versus the judge shall cause him to lie down. So clearly it's that the person taking responsibility here, taking things into their hands, versus the judge doing it themselves. As to why a judge would get involved, I do not know, but it's simply not what it says. And it says here, scourge him before them, meaning the judges, plural, according to his iniquity, versus beaten before his face, which is one judge, according to his fault. And it says by a certain number. In verse 3, the continuous difference is noted. Scourge versus beat. It says, your brother will be disgraced if you exceed that 40 stripes, which means that your brother is shamed. Remember, this is a honor and shame culture in the Middle East and in the Eastern Hemisphere as well. Even to this day, that this is prominent, this honor and shame culture. So your brother will be disgraced before you if you exceed these 40 stripes, which is to make an example of him that they're a shame. You're going to go above and beyond what's prescribed. Versus your brother should seem vile, which means repulsive, morally despicable, hateful, or despised. So this is merely the opinion of one person to say that you are vile to me. Whereas if someone is publicly disgraced, they are dishonored, they are shamed in front of the whole community. It's not simply the opinion of one person that they would seem vile. No, they are in fact shamed. It's not an assumption, it's not an impression that one has individually. It's more a collective shame that this person is now in the light of being shamed. And the reputation is also has decreased as a result. In verse 5, the word seed versus child, and it says here, a man not related shall not marry the woman who's been widowed versus a stranger. You do not marry them to a stranger. So this is vague, not really vague, but it is more, I'd say, more inclusive in the Masoretic text. What the Septuagint is describing is that this person must be blood related, and this seems to be someone who's near of kin, of the same tribe as well. On the other hand, the Masoretic is prescribing that a person can simply be of other tribes of the children of Israel. Does not have to be of the same family. Does not have to be, let's say, Ephraim. They don't have to be of Ephraim. They could be of Reuben, for example. And that's not what it's saying here, that it just does not have to be a stranger. No, they have to be closely related. Shall not marry out of the family, in brackets. That was inserted, but it gives you a bit more understanding as to what that means, how closely related. Next, we can see here it says, dwell with her. That is the person, the new husband's, what they should do is they shall dwell with her. That's what is prescribed here. Versus to perform the duty of a husband's brother to her, which is vague and general, does not describe in so many words what that even means. In verse 6, child versus firstborn. And it says, shall bear, talking about the wife, versus she bears. It says, shall be named by the name of the deceased, referring to the child, versus shall succeed in the name of his brother who is dead. So, anyway, they're similar. I'm not going to harp too much on that. And it says, blotted out of Israel versus put out of Israel. Verse 7 says, shall the woman go up to the gate? So this is a express written command. This is what she shall do. Versus let his brother's wife go up. So this is optional. He wants to do it. And the name of his brother, this is the accusation, the allegation by the wife, saying, my husband's brother will not accept the name of his brother in Israel, versus to raise up to his brother a name in Israel. So it is a specific name being described in the Septuagint. In this case, the name of the brother, whether it's his first name, possibly more likely the family name, and versus a name, on the other hand, in the Masoretic, it is just saying a name. It could be any name, a new name, not necessarily the name of the brother who's been deceased. We have an addition as well as of he will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. So that was added. In verse 9, we have an omission of the name Israel, build his brother's house in Israel. In verse 11, we have this term being used in regards to a man's reproductive organs, private parts, which is something we still use to this day, an expression we use even in 2021. In the Masoretic, it describes male reproductive organs as the secrets. In verse 15, about having diverse weights and measures, it is saying we should have a true and just weight versus a perfect and just weight. And that difference is can be seen twice. In verse 16, or I should say 18, skipping ahead there, referring to the children of Amalek and how they dealt with Israel after they came out of Egypt, it says, he withstood you in the way, in the journey, and harassed your rear, which means to verbally and physically attack, those that were weary behind you, and you did hunger and were weary, and he did not fear Elohim. So that's in the Septuagint. In the Masoretic text, it's expressed little differently. It says that he met to you by the way, so it seems to be more resistance in the Septuagint. It's not just meeting somebody, it's withstanding them, it's standing against them, essentially. You're putting up resistance. You're becoming a stumbling block. You're an obstacle. And smote the hindmost of you, so specifying only physical attacks, not opening it up to possibly verbal attacks as well. And all that were feeble behind you, talking about those who were weak, so weary and feeble, pretty much synonyms. And you were faint, so it describes in the Septuagint as to the cause, the root reason why they were feeble, why they were faint. It's because they were hungry. And it is not describing, I should say, those who are old or young. It's simply saying those who are weak due to hunger. And the Masoretic, the assumption is they were feeble, faint. These are fragile people, most likely children, young children, and older adults, seniors. The last verse we're going to look at, verse 19, it's describing what Yah is what he is commanding them to do. He's saying, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. So kill their descendants. There shall be no survivors, essentially, is what it's saying. Don't leave them a legacy. In the Masoretic, a similar sentiment is echoed. Blot out the remembrance of Amalek. So one can take this and interpret it in an extreme way to mean, don't just kill all the legacy, don't just stop there, but perhaps even those who remember Amalek, which is, I admit, extreme. So that's all I have for you for this chapter. Thank you very much for your time. May God bless you and make your way prosperous. Until next time, you've been watching the Septuagint versus the Masoretic. Maranatha.